Hi, welcome to Comptroller's Corner. I'm your host, Pat Curry, joined as always by Buffalo Comptroller Mark Schroeder. Our top story today, in a report required by the city charter, the Comptroller notes that improved spending of bond proceeds and reduced borrowing has led to reductions in the interest costs for city capital projects. Now, Mark, when you first started to issue these annual report, it's called the Comptroller's Estimate Report.
Right.
You noted that the city was borrowing more money than it could spend for capital projects. So one of the things you did was to reduce the maximum borrowing amount so that the city had less money sitting there waiting to be spent and interest costs weren't being incurred for projects that weren't ready to begin. And you have noticed that this, along with an improved spending of bond proceeds on capital projects, has actually led to quite significant progress and has reduced the interest cost burden that the city currently bears.
Exactly, Patrick. First and foremost, the Comptroller's office, we need to have an attention to detail, and that's what we have. And we have a responsibility to review things, and that's what we do. And there are also certain restrictions coming from different third parties, IRS, other things, that we're very mindful of. And so, quite simply, I've been the Comptroller for 32 months, and we do an analysis. And we figured out that each and every year, for whatever reason, the Comptroller would go to the market and would borrow $22 million because the citizens group and the mayor and the council says that's the infrastructure capital needs we need. Fine. But the proof is that the city has been unable, at least over the last 3 years I've been here, to spend all of the money. And so for all of the reasons why what you said is true, it would cost the citizens, it would be a burden to the citizens if we didn't do something about it. When I became the Comptroller, and the first thing I did was elevate Ann Forty-Sciarrino, and we said, we are interested in teaching and training not only people on our floor, the Comptroller's office, but everybody within City Hall. We have that responsibility. That's what we've done. That's why there's progress. That's why the city is doing better over the last 3 years, is because we've shown some leadership, and the city has responded to our leadership. It's a good thing.
Now, just to go over some of the numbers, you took office in 2012. In the 3 years prior to you taking office, the city roughly spent about 30% of its bond proceeds in the first year. In 2012, your first year in office, the city spent 46% of those bond proceeds in its first year, and the city spent 59% of its bond proceeds in the first year in 2013. So that's the kind of progress that we're seeing as far as the spending of these funds, and that's important because when you borrow the funds, you start incurring interest costs, and you better spend that money so that you're not wasting that interest cost. So the city is spending that money now very quicker than it has been prior.
Yeah, no question about it. And so it's important for us to identify certain things, and then we want to work with the city. And in this particular case, we have, and so it's really a win-win for everybody. So it's something that we're going to continue. And as you noted, this year, because the city has done better in spending the money, we were able to be more flexible in allowing a potential of more money to borrow. But we are going to be scrutinizing, and we are going to be working with the different departments to make sure that we have empirical evidence that they're going to be able to spend the money within the 12-month period. If they don't, we will reject it and we won't borrow it. But as you know, we have tools that when the city is ready, we know how to execute the tools, because we never want to put the city at a disadvantage when they're trying to do infrastructure or capital projects that are important to the citizens.
Now, you mentioned you increased the maximum borrowing amount, but you're standing firm that you will only borrow funds for projects that are ready to begin, and you have to be shown very convincing evidence that those projects are ready to go. Otherwise, you won't borrow the funds for these projects, correct?
That's correct. And we really have elevated this, Patrick. As you know, and the citizens know, I've bragged about this. When I first became comptroller 32 months ago, there was one certified public accountant on the 12th floor. We now have 8, and we're working on number 9. And so within each of the divisions that I have responsibilities for, we have a certified public accountant. It's very important because we're able to elevate and teach and cultivate the staff. They understand best practices, and then we're able to communicate clearly, like we did 3 years ago when we first suggested this to the mayor, to the deputy mayor, and to the Commissioner of Public Works, because the Commissioner of Public Works really dominates most of the capital funding. And so we made it clear we're not trying to be difficult. We just want to make sure that we're operating properly under best practices, and we don't want to be scrutinized by IRS or by a third party suggesting that we are borrowing way too much money. Even the Citizens Commission, the Citizens, what's their correct?
The Citizens Planning Council?
Yeah, the Citizens Planning Council, and these are citizens who are, volunteers, and they understand, because in the first year they came to see me and they didn't quite understand why we were doing something different than previous controllers. And I said, well, no offense, it's just that we don't want to borrow all of this money if it's not going to be used within a year. And then we explained what the consequences are if we did, and then they got it. They didn't argue with us. And so now it's been a learning experience, I think, for everybody within City Hall, and we're grateful for it. And we did it in such a way that we wanted to make sure that we want to be cooperative, but we are going to do things best practices, period, the end.
And you mentioned the Department of Public Works. They have teamed up with our office and coordinated, and the improved communication between our office and the Public Works is exemplified by the findings of this report, showing that the city is doing a better job in spending these funds.
Yeah, and one of the things too, to the mayor's credit and to the Commissioner of Public Works credit, over the last year or so, they've brought in some personnel who understand that they really have to be organized, and they have to be able to procedurally move through the process. It is a process, and there's contracts, and there's all sorts of things that have to be signed, and they're doing a much better job, to their credit.
And this is helping to reduce the debt burden. Now, the city's debt burden has been reduced by over $100 million in the past decade or so, but all 3 rating agencies, Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's, all still say that although they've been upgrading Buffalo recently, that our debt burden is still high. So this debt policy that you've set up
fits in.
Yep, fits in perfectly. Will help reduce the amount of debt that the city has, and help hopefully increase our rating with the rating agencies even further. Yeah,
and Patrick, I hope that you will suggest to the listening and to the audience here that there is a way for them to get this report. We would like them to look at this report because some of the things that you talked about are in the report that we issued to the mayor on August 1st and to the Common Council through the clerk's office, and the citizens are welcome to see it on our website, and I'm sure you'll give that information towards the end of the show.
They can check it out on our city website, city-buffalo.com/controller, and look for the Controller's Estimate and Report. Now, Mark, switching gears for a little bit, you have issued a request for proposal with help from a professional firm in an analysis of the gross receipts tax. Now, to give a little background, the city is due a tax from any utility operating in the city of Buffalo, and you've noticed that the revenue for that tax item line has diminished.
Yeah.
And one of the parts in your annual audit plan is to look where not only to minimize expenses, but also to maximize revenues.
Absolutely.
So one of the things your audit team is looking at is looking similar to the way you did in the streetlight audit, because our department doesn't quite have the manpower expertise on the laws and regulations governing this area. You're going to do a request for proposal, which opens up a bidding process and allows a company that does this for a living professionally to do this. And the best part about it is the way you've designed this request for proposal is the city only pays if they get money in the long run. So they get a percent, the company that does it gets a percentage of what the city gets from these companies that haven't been paying their utility tax. So it doesn't cost the city a dime, and we could see increased revenue from this.
Yeah, it's important, and it's something that was started, you know, back in the 1990s. Councilman Coppola and others suggested that there be a audit on street lighting. There was, and exactly what you suggested happened, that the city of Buffalo did receive money back. So we've taken, at the request of the Common Council, they asked sometime last year if we would look in and do the same thing. We did.
For the street lights.
For the street lighting. And that's coming to a conclusion. Right now.
I believe that they've provided information to the utility company and they're waiting for a response from them.
Right, so we're kind of wrapping that up, but we knew from the beginning that it would be important to identify the different utilities and to do this separately and to do it with a company who was adroit at doing this, who had the staff and who could look at it in such a way and point out again that we're interested in doing this because the technology has changed considerably, and we noticed that less revenue is coming in. There's a reason for that. We want to know what it is. And also, by hiring an outside firm, there is a possibility that we could be getting revenue to come back in, similar to the streetlight audit of the 1990s. So it's a good thing to do, but the one thing that I'm committed to is that for whatever reason, these things have happened in 10-year periods, 20-year periods, the last time they did this. Now, once we do it, Patrick, as you know this, once we do an audit, then it brings way for a anniversary audit. So we're looking at it every single year. So there's not a gap of 20 years. And so we've been able to figure this out, and we'll have a lot to report to the people probably over the next couple of months on the utility audits that we're doing.
Now, heading up this division and heading up this effort for you is Kevin Kaufman. He's the one that designed the annual audit plan that tries to maximize revenues and minimize expenditures. I actually sat down with Kevin for a talk about what makes him tick and the efforts that he's undergoing as City Auditor. So stay tuned for this special interview with City Auditor Kevin Kaufman on Comptroller's Corner. Hi, I'm here with Kevin Kaufman, the City Auditor, who leads the Division of Audit for the City of Buffalo. Now, Kevin, as City Auditor, what does your job entail?
Well, Pat, I started here about 2 years ago, in November 2012, and since I've been here, we've tried to focus on improving the internal audit function within City Hall. We've tried to increase the number and the quality of the internal audits coming out of our department. To do this, I have managed the team we have. We've focused more of our efforts on getting internal audits out the door, and to improve the quality, we've done some training with our auditors to get them more equipped to come out with better audits.
And you approve and edit all audits before they're issued out of this office, correct?
I'm pretty involved in the audit process, from the design of the audit, the planning of the audit, but most of the work is all done by the audit team, and I just manage the audit team. Without them, we go nowhere.
So you provide the team leadership and training in order to enable them to do these audits in a more efficient and more professional manner?
Yeah, that's our goal, is to put them in a place where eventually they can do the entire process themselves, where I'm just reading the end product. Until we are at that point, I'm a little more involved than probably the city auditor would be normally. But in the next few years, I will have, hopefully, be able to delegate more of that responsibility so that they will have, I'll have
less to do in the day-to-day workings of the audit, and you could oversee the end product.
Oversee more, which will lead to even a larger increase in the number of audits that come out of our department.
And it'll allow your staff to take a more leadership in their approach to audits and exhibit more autonomy as the way they operate.
Well,
correct?
it'll be great for them because they will have more ownership of each of these audits, which, I'm sure they'll appreciate in the long run. But until we are fully trained and everyone is on the same page, we can't quite do that yet. And it's a learning experience for all of us. For me, I've never worked in government accounting before, and a lot of the auditors have never worked in outside accounting where I worked, so we have experiences that we want to teach each other.
Now, you've said that you increased the number of audits that you do in a particular year, but also your audits have led to significant changes in the way that the city government operates. For instance, the most high-profile audit under your watch has been the Erie Basin Marina audit. Your audits found that Brandon Services, the company that was operating the marina, owed the city more than $500,000 in rental obligations because they shorted the city in gas sales. There was some gas missing. They shorted the city on food sales and other sales from the shop, and they deducted money from the rent, which was not allowed by the city charter or the contract or the common council. So as a result of that, there's actually 2 new operators of the marina, and there is no more of the city not getting the amount that it's deserved and that it's owed for the Erie Basin Marina. Am I right?
Yeah, our goal of the audit was just to test the rental calculation provided by the operator. We were comparing the rental calculation to the contract to make sure the calculation was proper, and then to test the sales figures on the calculation to see if they were accurate. And in the course of the audit, we found quite a few discrepancies in their numbers and their calculation, which resulted in the $500,000 adjustment. And some of that adjustment, it went both ways. They underreported food sales, they misreported their gasoline sales, but they actually overreported their slip rentals. So our approach is independent and objective. We're not out to cause anyone harm, and I think that's important to realize. For us to be effective auditors, we have to keep that independent and objective attitude.
So in the cases where they overpaid, you acknowledged that and made a credit. In the cases where they're underpaid, you obviously have pursued that payment, and right now it's in arbitration. We can't say too much about where it stands, but you're participating in the process, making sure the city gets what's owed to it. Am I correct?
Yeah, my job is to make sure that the proper amount of rent was paid. Whether the operator overpaid or underpaid, it really didn't matter. We designed our tests to assure that the proper amount was paid. The result of this one was a large underpayment. It could have, with a different operator, it could have went the other way, but our tests were just to figure out that the proper amount was paid.
Now, another audit that had significant changes to city policy was the discretionary funds audit of the Common Council. Now, far before you came here, or even Mark Schroeder came here, there was a councilman who got into trouble with the use of discretionary funds, and it was decided that there should be a review of how these funds are spent. And not only did your audit come up with some findings, but also some recommendations. And one of those recommendations was that a set series of guidelines we put in place to govern the disbursement of these funds. Now, that recommendation was followed by the council, and they're actually using your guidelines, and you actually provided them more input in how to improve those guidelines, and they took your advice on that, and right now it has a very controlled and governed set of guidelines that oversee this money, and to make sure that no money gets used for inappropriate purposes, correct?
Yeah, when we first came here, there really wasn't a set of rules. There was nothing documented, so no one knew what to follow. Everyone had their own guidelines on how they should spend the money. And our goal of the audit was really to put into place a written set of guidelines that each council member would have to file, and also to increase the accountability and transparency of the funds being spent. And we sat down with the Common Council and we talked to them about these guidelines, and they actually agreed to it. They were happy that someone finally put a set guidelines in place for all of them to follow, so they wouldn't be subject to the same, they couldn't misappropriate any of these funds. It would be much harder and now they're more accountable, and it's operating much smoother than it was before this audit happened.
And actually, one of the things you put in place is that there has to be a receipt or an invoice or some other documentation for every penny spent in discretionary funds before you'll approve any contract or before you move forward with the funding, correct?
Yeah, we only allow so much money to be spent at a time, just to assure that the taxpayer money doesn't get misappropriated. Then for every penny spent, we need a receipt for those funds in order for them to get any additional funding, which with these controls in place, we think the process is running much smoother.
And your division is actually involved in this process because you monitor the contracts and you approve the disbursements and the checks that get cut to these groups. So you're playing a direct role in this, so you can tell if these guidelines are being followed.
Yeah, we did the audit, and then after the audit, we assigned one of the members of the audit to keep on this and to look through all the receipts that come through to see if they are receipts that are allowed under the guidelines that we put into place. And the process is running pretty smoothly at this point.
And I've heard from councilmen that, as you said, that have welcomed these guidelines, and it shows them direction and gives them a way to deal with groups that they've funding, and just tell them the rules from now on, and it makes their life easier.
It does make their life easier because they can show these groups the guidelines now and tell them this is how you can spend the guidelines, or else we're not going to be able to give you money. They can blame the controller. Look, this is the way we have to spend the money according to the controller. So I think it's better for everyone in the long run to have a written set of guidelines.
Now, these audits have been completed under your annual audit plan, which prioritizes audits that will have a positive impact on the city's bottom line, so that you can use your resources wisely and only expend some of your employees' time on something that's actually going to have a financial impact on the city in a positive way, correct?
Yeah, each year we have to come up with this annual audit plan. It's required by both the charter and our internal auditing standards that we put into place. And what it does is we list the audits that we anticipate performing in the next year, or at least puts a list of possible audits in. When we started, basically we take our expenses and our revenues, we look what is our biggest expenses, what are our biggest revenues, and try to tailor our audits based on those. If payroll is our biggest expense, it's always appropriate to be doing an audit of payroll. And we have been all year doing audits of payroll.
You're going by department doing the payroll with the goal of eventually hitting every department in the city and making sure that the payroll is done up to snuff and everything is done appropriately and in accordance with the city charter and state law.
Eventually, yeah, it will take some time, but we do plan on looking at all the payroll within the city. Now, other things in the audit plan, we put a summary of what we accomplished in the prior year, list out all our audits and get a summary of the audits completed, the recommendations from the audits. Then we've also included, we started doing follow-up audits, and we put a list of the follow-up audits. So if we did an audit 2 years ago, the last year we would have done a follow-up on that audit to see that our recommendations were put into place. Then also in the audit plan, we list the required audits, the audits that are required by the city charter. So every 2 years we have to perform an audit of the Common Council. So last year we performed an audit of their payroll, which fits in line with our own audits. The Common Council audit has to be done by an independent auditor every 2 years, and we had independent auditors come in and review their payroll process. They gave us a few recommendations, including automating the payroll, documenting the processes, and next year we'll follow up on those recommendations to see if they've been implemented by the Common Council. The other audit that has to be done according to the charter is a peer review. We have to do that every 3 years, and that'll be done in the current year. And what that does, it's basically an audit of the auditors. Someone independent will come in and look to see if we're doing proper work, if we have proper documentation for our recommendations in our audit, to assure the public that what we're doing is proper, that if we recommend something, we can back it up with facts and documentation. We're not just coming out with conclusions that are baseless. Right. So we'll do that in the fall, and hopefully we'll get some recommendations on how to improve the audit process, but also give some assurance to the taxpayer that we're doing things the right way.
Now, you're a certified public accountant and you have private sector experience. How have you used your background to reshape the division of audit?
Well, I worked in public accounting for a long time, performing audits of companies. So the first thing we did is try to find the internal auditing standards and put those into place. The Institute of Internal Auditors has a set of standards that we have now put into place and try to follow with every audit we perform. Then the other thing we've tried to do is train our employees on proper documentation of an audit. Some of them just didn't know because they didn't work in the private sector to know how to properly document an audit, and we're working hard to get them up to speed on that. They're all very good auditors. It's just some of them didn't know the proper documentation. But once they learn that, their work has improved dramatically, and it's really been a great transformation. So
you used your background to provide your employees with better training in order to perform these audits more efficiently?
Well, yeah, that's the goal, is to make all our auditors the best they can be, because if we rely a lot on them to get the work done. They are the backbone of this operation. Without them, we can't do anything.
Now, Kevin, you're from the area, but you went to college down in Florida. What drew you back to Buffalo after you graduated?
Well, it seems sort of crazy that I'd come back from Florida, but I did, and I grew up here, so I knew something about the area, and I would come back for vacation all the time when I lived there. And over time, you just fall in love with the place. It's hard. You get away, but your heart never leaves Buffalo, so I came back eventually, and I've been very happy here since my return.
That's great. And you're a Buffalo Sabre season ticket holder, am I correct?
Yeah.
So hopefully there's some brighter days on the horizon there. But
well, we've got one way to go at this point, so hopefully in the next few years.
Well, thanks for joining us on Comptroller's Corner, Kevin, and thanks for your service to the City of Buffalo.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
Yes, the City of Buffalo residents are lucky to have a watchdog like Kevin Kaufman leading up the Division of Audit. Now, Mark, you brought in Kevin Kaufman, a certified public accountant, to lead this division, and you're very inspired by the approach he's taken and the progress that he's made reshaping this audit division.
Yeah, no question about it, Patrick. He is a real professional. He has the credentials. Not only does he have the responsibility via the charter to put together the audit plan, but as you remember, some time ago, we put together a strategic plan for overall audit and control, which would include all three divisions. He was instrumental in putting together the strategic plan for audit. And keep in mind, citizens of Buffalo, for whatever reason, Kevin Kaufman is the first certified public accountant in about 7 years as the city auditor. Now, I don't know what the reason for that was, but I will assure you, as when I'm controller, all three divisions are going to be run by certified public accountants. It makes a huge difference, and also it develops bench strength within the divisions. Kevin Kaufman, over the last 32 months that I've been the controller, we've probably done more audits than in Buffalo controller history. That's because we have somebody who knows what to do, and he has my full 100% confidence.
Now, Mark, we're running out of time. We just have a minute left. I understand over the weekend it was the South Buffalo Italian Festival.
Can you believe that?
Now, many viewers might not know, but you're 50% Italian. Your mother is Carmela Bongiovanni Schroeder. So tell us a little about this festival. You were instrumental in starting this thing back 10 years ago.
So back 12 years ago, Patrick, we started the Greater South Buffalo Chamber of Commerce, and through it, we decided that we would have certain things that would benefit the community and